It's the opposite.
High fly ball, deep left field. Oh, 27 does it again.
God, Fernando Tatis Jr. with a 2-run shot has the Padres on the board. Ball and 2 strikes to Shohei here. Oh,
Got it, got it, got it! 33!
Oh, wow. Where did that one go? That's his 11th. Driven out to deep center field. Going back, Springer, turning, looking, see ya! Oh, what a shot by Judge! The Yankees lead 1-0.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Free Baseball. It's episode number 45. A new name with us, new face. We talked about him a little bit last show. If you would go read our article, we did the Hall of Fame predictions. This is Matt Partridge. He's a writer for Athletes Hub. Obviously, as always, I'm Davis Bird, and I'm joined by Jake Crumpler and Matt Partridge. So
Hi.
we can go around. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for having me on. So I live over here in the UK. I started my interest in baseball when I was about 14, 15. Just started playing locally and was fortunate enough to go on a tour. We went to, we flew into Detroit in 1995. I remember seeing Lou Whitaker hit a ball at Tiger Stadium, went through a glass window in right field. That was fun. And yeah, we just traveled around a bit, played some baseball over in the States, and I got hooked. And ever since, I've just been a big fan, really. Opportunities limited over here in the UK, but yeah, great sport, love it, and it's nice to be on this evening.
And it's
Welcome.
Awesome to have you. As always, we're going to go over some offseason transaction stuff that's gone on. Not as much as the last few weeks, but we can start with a big one and a big nostalgia one. Andrew McCutchen re-signs with the Pittsburgh Pirates. 1 year, $5 million. Of course, McCutchen, really a Pirates legend. Just cool to see, maybe he's still got a little bit of juice left in his bat. Last season wasn't necessarily the best for Kutch, but let's see. What are you guys hoping for Kutch in Pittsburgh second time around? Jake, your audio is not working again.
Yeah, I muted myself right before I started talking. Great.
Way to go.
I said I'm hoping for fireworks. I'm ready to root for the Pirates because Mr. Nutting is not doing much to give us reasons to root for the Pirates. I think the Pirates are one of those teams with a long storied history that sort of gives you reason to root for them. They've been underdogs at times. They've been employers of really exciting players, and Andrew McCutchen was one of those in the early days of his career, winning an MVP back in 2012, I think it was. So it's exciting to see him back there. I'm hoping that he can have somewhat of a renaissance. It's not like he's slowed down that much the last few years, but he doesn't provide much defense. His bat has dropped off a lot, but I think it'll be more of a nice story to see him back there. But I don't know. I keep seeing people on social media posting the Pirates lineup being like, "Ooh, are you guys excited for this lineup?" I'm like, the Pirates are going to lose 100 games. I don't know what you're getting excited about, but yeah, it'll be cool to see him back in the black and yellow.
Yeah, it's I guess it's tough for these sort of, if I could say, small market teams. I mean, I know the Pirates aren't quite down there with the A's, but yeah, not a lot to celebrate of late. I'm sort of thinking back to Bobby Bonilla when I think about Pirates legends, and but it's nice to see McCutchen back in there, and yeah, I hope he does well. I hope he does well for them in that league. Bob
Nutting will get his Andrew McCutchen bobblehead night money again. And another big piece of news. This time, Minnesota Twins extend ace Chris Paddock for 3 years, $12.5 million. He's going to be due $2.5 million in 2023, $2.5 million in 2024, and it's going to jump up to $7.5 million in 2025. This extension is also going to be laden with $2.5 million worth of incentives. This does buy out a year of his free agency in 2025, so a little bit there, and then buying out the last few years of his control. This is really cheap for Chris Paddock, who You know, everyone kind of harkens back to the Padres days, like his first year where he was really good, and then kind of has not really replicated that since. But he was pretty solid last year for the Twins, who have a very underrated rotation, I think.
Yeah. Did I just hear you call him Ace Chris Paddock?
Yeah, he's the ace now, man. He's that 4 ERA is going to carry the Twins. He's just really good, man.
I think he won't debut with the team this year until after the All-Star break at the earliest, because he did undergo Tommy John surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was Tommy John surgery. So that limited him to 22 innings, but that was his first year outside of San Diego, where he saw mixed results. Like you said, he was really successful in 2019. And then the sort of downside of being a two-pitch pitcher started to hit him in those following years, but his underlying metrics sort of stuck with what he did in his first year and might have actually been better in certain cases. So I think he's still a guy that needs to develop a third pitch, because he's really fastball changeup right now. That changeup's really good, but his fastball is somewhat hittable as well. So I think, you know, a horizontally moving pitch would do well for him, whether it's a cutter or a slider, or even like a curveball that's not just straight up 12-6. I think that would do him well. But yeah, it'll be cool to see him around in Minnesota for longer. I think, like you said, they're pretty good at pitching development. So I'm excited to see what he can do. He's one of those guys that's fun to watch because he gets angry out there, like Max Scherzer. I remember in 2019 when he was really good, my brother had him on his fantasy team. He just had, like, I'm pretty sure he had him, Scherzer, some other guys, and he was just like, yeah, I got a rotation full of mad pitchers. He goes out there and he's mad, and I'm just like, yeah, that's it. They're fun to watch, and you can really get behind them and see the emotion that they pitch with and how it moves them forward. Lance Lynn's another example of a guy like that. Mad Bum.
Mad Bum's the angriest one of the bunch. You know, Paddock, he only threw 22 innings. I think you said 22 and a third.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a 4 ERA in that time, but he had a 1.7 FIP, which is still really good, and like a 3.01. Is that right, Jake? You're probably looking at his FanGraphs page. I think he had like a 3 xERA.
3.1.
Yeah, he had like a whatever 3.01 xERA. So I mean, his metrics were a lot better than what he produces. And the Twins have a very good young rotation, especially led by like Joe Ryan, like Bailey Ober, Sonny Gray, Chris Paddock. Like they've got guys that could make their rotation pretty good.
Well, it's just nice to hear some news coming out of Minnesota that doesn't circle around Correa as well. Just to be reminded that they have a pretty good team there. In fact, I guess the injuries is the big issue maybe for Paddock. There's a contract like that. I know there's incentives you just mentioned in there, but do you think it's going to be an issue that coming off the Tommy John surgery? I mean, how do pitchers tend to fare at his sort of age after that kind of injury?
He's younger. He's on the younger end. I think he's only 26. I think it'll be his age 27 season. So that's sort of a mixed bag there as well. Like you don't really know what you can expect. And like Jake said, he really is more or less a 2-pitch pitcher. He's just fastball changeup. He throws a curveball, but it is a 12-6 curveball. It's not like a sweeper curveball. So getting what they can get out of him is going to be the big thing. But I mean, Jake said too, they're a very good team with pitcher development. Like look at Joe Ryan. Joe Ryan was not an unheralded prospect, but he certainly wasn't like in the top tier of prospects. And now he's pretty much the de facto ace of that rotation. Wouldn't you say, Jake?
Yeah. Unless you really like Sonny Gray.
I do not really like Sonny Gray. So I would say Joe Ryan probably is the ace of that team. So maybe I think the Twins could get the most out of him. But yeah, it's up in the air. Sure. On to this next move that I am absolutely thrilled to talk about. The Chicago Cubs, my team, of course, have signed Trey Mancini, known cool baseball guy, one of the best guys in baseball, for 2 years, $14.5 million. It's got $7 million worth of incentives related to plate appearances in there because he has been a little injury prone, but also has had to deal in the last couple years with the cancer flare up. But I imagine if he plays, he should probably hit that figure as well. Yeah, I mean, before I talk about it, what are you guys thinking about the Mancini move?
The first thing that I thought about was, I guess they're not as confident in Matt Mervis as everyone else in the fantasy and baseball analysis industry is. But I don't know. I think he's got some more left in his bat. He was really unlucky in Houston last year after he got traded at the deadline, where I think everybody expected him to go off because he was moving from Baltimore, where they moved the fences out in left field, making it almost impossible to hit home runs, and then going to Houston, where they got the Crawford boxes, and it's super easy to just dump them in those short bleachers. But he didn't end up doing that. But he did win a World Series ring, so that's really cool for him. So I'm excited to see him play on a team that I'll be rooting for. But it's hard to predict what he's going to be like. I think if you just look at his career lines, that's probably what you're likely to expect, like 265 with 20 home runs. But I don't think he's going to be playing that full time, because I think he's more of a DH guy and a first base guy. And you got Eric Hosmer there and Mervis and a bunch of other guys, Patrick Wisdom as well. So I don't think he's going to be playing full time, but he definitely adds to a lineup that needed a little bit of more oomph.
Yeah, I think from what I was reading, I think a lot of people were expecting a sort of feel-good story, him going back to Baltimore, where he was so revered and had that such a great spell. So I was a bit surprised, but no, good to see him land with the Cubs. I would say Cubs over here, unless you're a Cardinals fan, another of those teams that a lot of people like the Cubs, the whole history and the drought and the rest of it. So to see them get over the line when they did was great. So yeah, I think that's a good fit, a good match. I'm hoping he does a good job there.
Yeah, my big thing with the Mancini move is there's multiple facets of why it's a good move. First off, I know this wasn't in the rundown, Jake, but it does have an opt-out after the first year. So it does have an opt-out clause triggered in there. So he could, if he has a good year, after this year, he could opt out and be a free agent again, which if, he's making $7 million AAV, if he has a really good season, I would imagine he would. But Trey Mancini's a well-known, really good locker room kind of guy for a Cubs team that is very young. So more or less need someone like that. Jake also talked about Matt Mervis, who when we talk about the WBC thing as well in a different episode, we'll talk about him some more as well. But Matt Mervis is one of the bigger hitting prospects for the Cubs. He's typically a first base DH kind of guy, and I like the Mancini move because it's not going to thrust Matt Mervis into an everyday role. They're going to let him try to figure it out on his own with little pressure. There's already the Hosmer thing at first base, which Hosmer's making no money. So if he sucks, he's just gone. They're just going to get him out of there. Mancini, I don't think is going to be playing anything really but DH. Maybe if they need him, they'll throw him in a corner outfielder first base, but I don't really see that happening. But this gives them a lot of positional depth and versatility. They've got a lot of guys that can DH, a lot of guys that can play corner outfield spots, first base, everywhere else. Like Nick Madrigal, like Christopher Morel. Trey Mancini can play both corners. He can play first base. He can DH. Matt Mervis can play first base, DH, etc. Wisdom can play corner infield. They've got a lot of positional versatility with this team. And that lineup was had no thump. Outside of Seiya Suzuki, there was just nothing. And Wisdom, who strikes out 40% of the time. So Trey Mancini there, he'll most likely be the everyday DH, I would have to imagine, until they want to blood in Mervis, and then that gets a little bit murkier. But I really like the Mancini move. It's not very expensive, just 2 years. So I really like this for the Cubs, just because, if anything, he's just a great guy, and seeing Trey Mancini still be playing baseball is just wonderful, because he's just an awesome person.
Excellent.
So moving on, this was one I think I talked about last episode, I want to say, Jake. But the Milwaukee Brewers, they signed another guy. Wow, big spenders in free agency. This time it's Brian Anderson, former Marlins third baseman. So 1 year, $3.5 million deal. It's got $2 million worth of incentives baked in there. Brian Anderson he's just a baseball player. He's a very good defender, hits for a little bit of power, corner infielder, really good glove. But yeah, he's a Brewers guy, and it's weird because he's just such a Brewers player.
Yeah, just the ability to play multiple positions, and just I feel like they're good with underrated guys.
And he's a perennially underrated guy, I felt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he dealt with injuries the past couple of seasons. That's sort of what's held him back from showing what he showed earlier in his career. I think he can hit for a pretty solid average and hit 15 home runs maybe at his peak right now. That 2019 season is clearly an outlier where he hit 20 home runs. But I think the biggest part is, where is he going to play with this team? Right now, Roster Resource has him in a platoon role at third base or second base or DH. I think he can play all over. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him. I think he deserves everyday playing time, but if he needs to be platooned or used sparingly to keep him healthy, then that's probably what's best for him. But I'm sure the Brewers have a plan for him. But I liked Brian Anderson when he was coming up, and he was, like you said, an underrated guy, 115 WRC plus guy that had a solid glove. So we'll see if he can recapture that form from the early days of his career.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Brian Anderson, if I'm honest. I know sort of Luis Rios, isn't it? Plays third base for them. He was sort of a bit in and out last season, so I can see that him fitting in platooning a bit there. Of course, they got JC Winker went there, didn't he, from the Mariners? So yeah, they got a few changes over there. Be interesting to see how they fare in that division. Yeah.
What's the odds they throw him in right, Jake? Because what's their projected starter in right? Isn't it Tyrone Taylor?
Tyrone Taylor. What the
Yes.
heck just happened? My audio just broke. Give me a sec.
Jake contributing to an awkward silence. Brian Anderson, I've liked him too when he was coming up. He always felt like a guy that was just to break out away because he's an excellent glove and he has a lot of positional versatility. 2019 obviously was the outlier year, like Jake said, because everyone hit for a career high home runs that year because of the juice ball. But Brian Anderson definitely offers a lot of positional versatility to a Brewers team that is just full of guys that do that. Jake has left the building, so we're just going to move on. This time, next move is the Red Sox signed Adam Duvall to a 1-year, $7 million deal, $3 million worth of incentives. Duvall, of course, has long been part of the Braves team that won the World Series a couple years ago. Now, but he's 34 and he's going to join a Red Sox team that seems more or less in a state of flux. I don't know what the Red Sox plan is. I guess maybe they're going to give it a go with whatever they've got currently. But I don't know. This seems more or less like an uninspired move.
I think he's going to play center field, which is weird because he's going to be 35.
35-year-old Adam Duvall playing center field in Fenway.
Yeah.
Sounds like a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Where's Verdugo going to play?
He's been a right fielder for a while. I think Duran is the guy that they're stopping from coming up by playing Duvall there. So
now I guess they're gonna put Yoshida in left, and they're gonna put Verdugo right, and then trot out fossilized Adam Duvall in center.
He's somehow 2 years removed, 2021, from a 38 home run season. So there's obviously still something there. I just don't know if it's going to be happening in Boston. I don't know what the Red Sox are doing. I think they're doing everything they can to keep up with the juggernauts in that division. And I don't know if Adam Duvall is enough. They did sign Raimel Tapia, though. And I have a friend that's his favorite player. So I think that's going to be the difference maker.
That friend is me. I love Raimel Tapia.
Oh, okay.
It's totally not. But Tapia, he's a baseball player. Adam Duvall is a year removed from – Jake talked about being 2 years removed from putting up 38 home runs and 113 RBI. He's also now a year removed from posting an 87 WRC plus, which is well below league average, while also not really providing much value defensively. So, center field Adam Duvall project, I imagine, would be short-lived until they figure something else out. But maybe the Red Sox go on some sort of miracle run and pull it off. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit underwhelming, having seen JD Martinez depart and then obviously losing Bogaerts as well. Not exactly the sort of fit that they were probably hoping for, the big fans up there. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know how his health history's been with somebody of that age, whether they can rely on him as an everyday player. Probably not, but we'll see.
That's a good point because he did only play 86 games last season. That's an underrated point there. He had the year in 2020 where he played most of it, 38 home run year, pretty good. Before that was kind of a little bit plagued by injury, and last year plagued by injury again and inconsistency. So Red Sox taking a flyer on a guy, which, I mean, it is a 1-year deal, but the Red Sox still feel like the worst team in that division, if not the second worst team in that division in front of the Orioles, because the Orioles haven't done anything. So I don't know. On a whole, I would call that move uninspiring as well. moving on a little bit, the Mets sign another guy. They signed almost every single player in free agency is what it feels like. And this time they get Tommy Pham to a 1-year, $6 million deal, $2 million worth of incentives baked in there. Tommy Pham, most notably famous last year, not for playing baseball, instead of for slapping Jock Peterson over a fantasy football dispute. But yeah, I mean, they get Pham, who I imagine is going to be DH option, corner outfield, fourth outfielder, something, platoon guy, because he is also a little bit past his best.
Yeah, I think he'll be well served to keep his hands off other baseball players next year. Or he'll
Maybe.
risk being sued or something. But yeah, I think he'll definitely be a left-handed or a platoon guy versus lefties. He batted 273 last year versus lefties for a 115 WRC plus compared to 81 versus righties. So I think that's clear. I really like Tommy Pham at his peak. But he's definitely past that now. He'll be 35 this next year. But I think he fits really well with the Mets that really don't have room for big guys on the team, not in terms of size, but in terms of playing time. I think he fits really well as like a role player on that team. That's sort of exactly what they're looking for after making an incredible number of moves this offseason.
Yeah, I don't think he'd be taking on Daniel Vogelback, although it'd be a bit foolish to do that.
I would love to see that fight.
Yeah. But no, again, I don't know an awful lot about Tommy Pham, but with the Reds, was it last year, I think?
He was the Reds, and then he got traded to – who did he get traded to, Jake? I know he got traded.
Padres?
That sounds
no, it was
right.
the Padres before. It was the Padres before. It was Boston.
Boston. That's right.
Right.
That's that was a move.
Hey,
too, where
he's a tough guy, bro. He got stabbed
When did he get stabbed?
like a year ago. Like,
I
I'm pretty
remember
sure
that.
prior to that you don't. Oh,
No, I'm Googling
one of the
it.
podcasts I listen to, that's like a big joke of like Tommy Pham getting stabbed. It's just like
Wound.
there seems to be like a common denominator
okay.
between him getting in fights, because this was like at a bar. He got stabbed at a bar.
Yeah, he got. First off, Jake, he got stabbed at a strip club. It's different.
Oh, even worse.
He got stabbed in the back. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a common denominator of Tommy Pham sort of picking fights with people, but he is a tough guy. So don't mess with him when you find him, or don't try to cheat in fantasy football.
I was going to make an awful segue, so I'm going to skip it. So the Royals, sign noted tough guy, if you ask him, Aroldis Chapman, to a deal. It's 1 year, 3.75, not 3.5, $3.75 million. Got $4 million worth of incentives there for Aroldis Chapman, who posted one of his worst seasons last year. He's been one of the most dominant relievers in all of baseball, basically since he's come up. Fell off a lot last year, down to earth for old Aroldis Chapman, known wonderful baseball guy that everyone likes and has no issue with. I can't even imagine that he's going to have a closer role. I think he's just a setup man in KC because he's not better than Scott Barlow. So I don't really see. I see why he signed there because the rest of their bullpen is pretty garbage, but he's more or less going to be a guy that the Royals hope is good, so they can trade him to some other team for a prospect at the deadline.
I really only think he signed there because that's the only team that was interested in him.
Most likely that too. I mean, I can't imagine there's other teams that are real bad, like the Pirates or maybe the A's would have given him some money.
Oh God, bro. No, please don't even put that in my mind. I would be so upset. Yeah, I am not going to be watching any Royals baseball. I think it would have been awesome if Aroldis just went unsigned and just sort of went out of everybody's minds. Yeah, that would have been great. But unfortunately, he'll still be playing. And I think the Royals are going to lose a significant number of fans. They're just a weird team. I don't think Aroldis is that great anymore. I've talked extensively about this on basically any podcast I've talked about him, but his velocity has been dropping for years now, and it dropped all the way down to 97.5 last year for a career low. He's going to be 35 next year. He's always been a guy that relies heavily on his velocity, and it's now without that velocity, he's obviously not the same pitcher, so he's not been as successful. And I don't think he's fully invested as well. We saw this past postseason when he was left off the Yankees playoff roster because he wasn't willing to show up to the workout and sort of play for his spot on the roster. And so I don't know. He's really not the type of guy that's making people. He's not making fans anywhere by the way that he's showing himself on the field and off the field. So yeah, let's hope it's a poor signing.
Yeah, I think a bit like you'd said, Davis, really, I thought he'll perhaps just bide his time within the Royals organization. And then if somebody needs a bit of a pickup player as they head into the postseason, or, they just need someone with that experience, then he might be the man to call on, regardless of his declining skills and the other issues we've just been talking about. So, yeah, maybe a big name signing for somebody a bit later down the line. But, yeah, a bit of a strange one.
Yeah, I agree with Jake. That would be perfectly fine if Aroldis Chapman just kind of petered out and went away. He's not a good man and probably should just have his time in spotlight be over. That's enough for signings. There's a couple more news around baseball sphere. Ideally, one that Miguel Cabrera was a big fan of. He said a little bit too late. The Tigers have changed dimensions of Comerica Park, which was known as a cavern. They pulled the center field wall in 10 feet to be still 412 feet from home. And the only other stadium in baseball that's deeper in center is, of course, Coors. But Coors is offset by being Coors, and in Colorado, Comerica Park is like one of the biggest pitchers' parks, complete cavern. Yeah, so I mean, maybe there will be some respite for hitters in Comerica.
Yeah, and then not only that, but they lowered the walls as well. So center field goes down to 7 feet. It goes down 1.5 feet to 7 feet. Right center field, which was probably the worst spot to hit in baseball. It's very reminiscent of the Giants' right center field because it had a big wall and was very deep out there. So they lowered that 6 feet down to 7 feet as well. And then in straight away right will be lowered 1.5 feet to 7 feet. I think this is really good. We saw the type of effect that changing outfield dimensions can have on an offense in Baltimore last year when they moved the left field fence way out there and offense cratered in that ballpark where it used to be a hitter's haven. It turned into a pitcher's park just like that. And the Tigers are a team that struggled mightily with the stick last year. And it'll be nice to see a change in that regard because they had a promising team going into last year. I predicted them to make the postseason, and they obviously did not. They were really bad. So I would love to see guys like Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson sort of take off next year with these new dimensions. And I think those are sort of the perfect changes because that center field was like 420 feet out to center, and the right center field was way out there, and the wall was 13 feet high, if I'm getting my math right. So yeah, it was impossible to hit out there. So I really hope this has a significant change. And if it doesn't have a significant change, it'll definitely have a marketable change. That's not the right word, but it will definitely have a noticeable difference there when teams go to hit there. And I think their pitching should be able to handle any of those downsides on the defensive end.
Right. I think I was mentioning earlier on, it brings back good memories of when I went to Detroit in 1995 and saw Lou Whitaker hit one through the glass window. I think it was in right field. So I guess that was a much smaller dimensions back Tiger Stadium. I haven't checked that, but yeah, it's quite well known the as you say, the cavernous dimensions previously at Comerica. So I think it can only be a good thing for that ball club, definitely.
Yeah, hopefully the new ballpark dimensions can help an offense, which ended up being at least ranked by Fangraphs as literally dead last and almost everything. So hopefully they can get a little bit of a boon there and pick it up and fulfill Jake's prediction, maybe just a year late, make the playoffs. One more bit of news before we skip on to the main crux of what we're going to talk about. Josh Hader, of course, signed a $14.1 million deal, which is going to avoid arbitration with the Padres. This is a record for the highest salary in arbitration history for a reliever. Hader, of course, was not really good after being traded to the Padres. He really struggled down the stretch, and especially in the playoffs. And everyone kind of memed just how bad Hader was with the Padres. But obviously, he still outlays his previous success in Milwaukee into this massive deal in arbitration. Yeah, I mean, they're really going to bank on him being the guy next year in their bullpen. But what are you feeling about this, Jake, since you are the big reliever man?
I got confidence that he's going to be able to turn things around next year. I think it was just a mechanical thing that sort of held him back. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to see him sign for that much. I know this is your second favorite reliever in baseball behind Aroldis Chapman. So,
Oh yeah, big Hader guy.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you guys think he gets more money next offseason than Edwin Diaz did this year when he set the record for a relief pitcher in free agency.
I don't know. I think it depends on what the season looks like for him, really. Relievers often face a case of, well, what have you done for me lately kind of syndrome. So, I mean, if Hader comes out this year and he's not Hader again, like he's just good but not great, I don't think so. But I think if he comes back to being Josh Hader, I think he does.
Yeah, I think if the Padres really go on a roll and really get some heads turning as people thought they would last year, I think it might be a little bit lost in all of that. There's so many good things going on at that club, and if they can really put a challenge in the NL West, then and he's part of that, then I think it's going to bode well for him. I'm not sure about the same comparison with the Diaz amounts, though. Maybe not quite those stakes. I remember him fondly from his time in Seattle, Diaz.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but Hader, obviously, I don't know. He's 1 year really removed now from posting like a 1.2 ERA and like peripherals that match in like 58 innings. He had a ton of strikeouts, just really good. And Hader, everyone knows when he's on, he's just completely dominant. He honestly, for a large point, he felt like the most unhittable pitcher in baseball, at least for me.
He was.
I mean, he'd come in for an inning and nobody could touch him. And basically all he did was just throw fastballs and sliders. I don't know. I really would bank on Hader returning to form. His underlying numbers were not as good nearly, but he posted like a 5 ERA, which is not Josh Hader. He posted like a 3.4
5.2 ERA and a sub-3 xFIP.
Yeah, so like he's bound to return to form. It's just let's see. I want to see that happen first before I'm going to say that he's going to beat Diaz's contract, which is what, 5 years, 100 million, so a little over 100.
Yeah, I think it was a little over.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think that's possible, especially with how the market's looking.
Mm-hmm.
But on to the main part of our show today. So I'll let Jake introduce this one because this was his idea.
Sure. Yeah. So MLB Pipeline is starting to reveal their top 10 prospects at each position. This is an exciting year because exciting part of the year because it leads up to the full complete top 100 list, which is always nice to see. I think one of the fun things about baseball is being able to project on young guys like these that haven't really made it to the majors. You get to see how guys might look going into the majors and how your team can project going into the future. It's a nice thing to always be considering that there's always some next wave of talent. So they go position by position and rank out the top 10 to hype everybody up for that top 100. So we'll look at those. And then I thought it would be fun to go back and look at some old top 100 prospects lists and remember some names and see how those sort of turned out, because they're usually not too, like, they're good, but they're not perfect. That's for sure. But with these, I think in each set of positions, I think it would be cool if we just run down the list and then each one of us give a guy we're excited to see in the near future. So we'll start with right-handed pitching prospects. The top 10 goes Andrew Painter, Grayson Rodriguez, Yuri Perez, Daniel Espino, Taj Bradley, Bobby Miller, Gavin Williams, Hunter Brown, Mick Abel and Gavin Stone. There's a couple teams that have 2 guys on this list. The Phillies have Painter and Abel. The Dodgers have Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone, and the Guardians have Daniel Espino and Gavin Williams. I'll start it off. I'm really excited to see Yuri Perez. This is a guy that's been rising through the farm system really quickly, and the Marlins are really good at pitcher development. So that's like 1A of why I'm excited to see him, because I think he's going to be really good. He pitched really exceptionally in 2021, sort of took a step back in 2022, but that's sort of understandable because he's literally 19. He was 19 years old last year. He's going to be 20 this next year. He's 6'8" as well. So he's got the pitcher's frame, and I think he's going to be really good. He throws really hard as well. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I wouldn't call him the next Sandy Alcantara, but I think he's really got some good stuff, and I think he's going to be an exciting guy, and I think he could be up in the next couple of years.
I'll have to be honest with you guys. My sort of depth of baseball knowledge doesn't extend too deep into farm systems, so I may be more of an observer in this section. But I'll certainly be happy to contribute on names that I do recognize. I can see a few down the list a little bit later on, but I'm very happy to hear you guys' opinions on some of these, and I'll be looking out for it as the season develops, see who gets introduced.
Sure.
So Jake talked about number 3, Yuri Perez. I'm going to talk about number 5 on the list, which is Taj Bradley of the Tampa Bay Rays. He is obviously starting pitcher because he's on the pitcher pipeline. This is a guy that I really think can turn into a cornerstone in the rotation in the Tampa Bay Rays, who are known for pitcher development. He's a smaller guy. He's only about 6'2". He doesn't have the biggest builds, and now you want to see big guys that throw hard. Taj Bradley comfortably sits about 96, 97. He's 6'2". He's like 190. He throws gas. He has an absolutely wicked slider. And he is very, very young. A lot of times you see guys come into the rotation a little bit on the older side, typically around like the 23, 24 mark is right when they're going to be hitting their stride. He's projected right now to be in their rotation this year. He's 21. So I really like that. He consistently throws strikes. He has a fastball that sometimes turns into a cutter. It's got like a little bit of cut ride, which a lot of teams are trying to preach. I know that's at least for the Cubs perspective, they're preaching like cut ride fastball and sweeper sliders. And he is that to a T. I know he plays for the Rays, but I think like his rock bottom floor would he be a fifth starter. And I think his ceiling is as an ace for the Rays.
Cool. Yeah, I think he's definitely got a shot, and you got to feel confident about the Rays developing pitchers. And onto left-handed pitchers, the list goes and starts with Kyle Harrison, and then goes to Ricky Tiedemann, Ken Waldichuk, DL Hall, Dax Fulton, Jordan Wicks, Matthew Liberatore, Jake Eater, Brandon Barrera, and Blake Walston. This one's hard for me because there's both a Giants pitcher and an Oakland pitcher. There's also 2 teams that have multiple guys on this list. The Blue Jays have Tiedemann and Barrera, and the Marlins have Fulton and Eater. I'm really excited for Tiedemann. He's really grown this last year, but I got to choose Kyle Harrison. He's maybe the best strikeout pitcher in the minors right now in terms of starters, and he was really incredible last year. He struck out nearly 40% of batters across 2 levels. He's still only 21 years old, so he's still got some ways to go until he hits the majors, but he's really got some great stuff and really amazing strikeout ability. He's got a big fastball, mid to upper 90s, and a really nice slider. And I think if he develops a third pitch, he could really be an ace. And if not, if everything really goes awry, I think he would be a great reliever in sort of the vein of Josh Hader. I think Kyle Harrison's got a bright future.
Yeah, Jake talked about his boys, and of course there's a Cubs pitcher on here, so I've got to talk about him. Jordan Wicks, I think he's ranked as the second best pitching prospect in the Cubs system. I think that's wrong. I think he's the best pitcher in their system just in general. He is really good, and he's not a guy that really fits the typical like starting pitcher mold for young guys, throw hard, little bit of issue with control. That's typically what you see, and they need to iron that out. He was really excellent in college, didn't really walk anybody, and he still continues to do that while striking out a lot of guys. He typically throws around lower 90s, which is good because who is his idol? Former Cubs great lefty John Lester. John Lester known for being lefty, excellent control, getting outs, never walking anybody.
Not being able to throw to first.
Not being able to throw it well. He can throw to first. So Jordan Wicks, yeah, he throws like 7 pitches, and he's just really good. He got a lot of strikeouts last year too. I think he only threw like 80 something. Let me do some math real quick. He threw 7 plus 66 plus.
The meme right now is all the numbers,
the
numbers on the screen.
Oh yeah, it's like the white lady with all the numbers permeating past.
Yeah,
he threw 101 innings and he got, let me see, 86 plus. Yeah, he got 126 strikeouts and 100 innings last year. So Jordan Wicks, I'm really looking out for him. Obviously, he's a cool guy too. Jake and Matt wearing the glasses. That's what he does. He wears the glasses out on the mound. Don't see that very much either. So cool guy to add to a Cubs rotation. That is
Davis is tricking you. He also has glasses.
I'm wearing contacts.
Just need Charlie Sheen here, and then we'll be all set.
Yeah. I'm really excited for Jordan Wicks, and I would honestly expect him to maybe make an impact next year too. One before we move on here, I wanted to see how you guys felt, at least Jake, on Matt Liberatore inclusion on this, because I really didn't think that it was warranted nor necessary, because he was kind of bad last year, and I don't really think he has the ceiling to project to be a top 10 guy on this list.
I think you're just a Cardinals hater, but
I don't think so. He was bad last year.
He was bad last year, both in the minors and the majors, but I think a lot of it has to do with his draft stock. He was picked 16th overall in the 2018 draft, so I think a lot of it still has to do with that. But you do have to consider that he left the Rays minor league system and went to the Cardinals and then just started going downhill. So it could just be a case of the Rays knowing what they had in a player and getting rid of them, and then the Cardinals getting the bad end of however that goes. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's definitely some other guys that could probably deserve to be on this list, especially after he sort of floundered in the majors with a nearly 6 ERA.
Yeah, and underlying numbers that match that. That's my big thing with Liberatore being on this list. I don't really think so. I mean, I think he projects like mostly as a 5th starter, if anything. But we can move on to the next list, which would be catchers.
Sure. Yeah. This one is an exciting one because it contains who will probably be the number 1 prospect going into next season, with Francisco Alvarez leading off the list. And he's followed by Diego Cartaya, Kevin Parada, Harry Ford, Logan O'Hoppe, Andy Rodriguez, Henry Davis, former number 1 overall pick, Bo Naylor, Drew Romo, and Edgar Cuero. Matt, is there anybody on this list that you are familiar with?
Yes, I mean, I was obviously looking out there for Harry Ford, first round pick with the Mariners in 2021, and a lot of hope placed on him. Obviously, he's got Cal Raleigh ahead of him, so I don't know how quick his progression will be. But I've been following him as a Great Britain fan as well, because of course he represented Great Britain at the qualifiers for the WBC, which I think you guys might speak about on a later podcast. So yeah, very excited to see him play. He's big hope for the future there.
Mm-hmm. He's got a lot of speed. He stole 23 bases last year at A-ball. So definitely a lot to project there. He seems like an athletic catcher. I am excited for another AL West guy in Logan O'Hoppe. He is likely to begin the season on the Major League roster. He debuted last year with just 5 games with the Angels. He was part of the Brandon Marsh trade, I think.
Yes.
Okay. There were 2 trades with the Phillies that they did, and in one of them they got O'Hoppe back, and he was actually one of the top performers in the minor leagues last year. He combined across the Angels and the Phillies for 26 home runs, 7 steals, and an incredible WRC plus, which it won't allow me to add because Fangraphs does that. But he had a 194 WRC plus in LA and a 144 WRC plus in Philly. So he's definitely a guy that hits the ball really well. He walked more than he struck out when he moved to Los Angeles. So I think this is a guy who's projected to hit really well. And the fact that he's going to be in that Angels lineup with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout and others, it could be really exciting, because I don't think Max Stassi's holding anybody back. He's a really good defender. He's sometimes shown a good bat, but he gets injured very often. And I think O'Hoppe could come and really vie for Rookie of the Year votes. That would be crazy if he won MVP over Mike Trout and Ohtani on his own team. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what he can do next year, because this is probably one of the few guys outside of Alvarez that could actually contribute. Oh, and Bo Naylor, that could actually contribute to major league teams this year.
I'm mad at Jake because he took the one I was going to talk about. But
Sorry.
he made a perfect accidental segue to talk about the other guy I chose, which is Bo Naylor, because he's also probably going to make an impact on a major league roster this year. Bo Naylor, obviously, one reason I'm really stoked just to see him play is because he's going to be playing on the same team as his brother, Josh Naylor, which already, that's cool. Two brothers on the same team doesn't happen very much. Bo Naylor, he struggled a little bit when he came to the majors, but he still did really only have kind of a cup of coffee. Played 5 games. I mean, he struck out kind of a lot, but he has good numbers in the minors. And he also puts up really good exit velocity numbers, which is always what you really want to see. He puts the bat to the ball and he hits it hard. And typically when you see stuff like that, because guess what his brother does, puts bat to the ball and he hits it really, really hard. So I would bank on Bo Naylor being really good. He's going to be given the opportunities to play and start because who's the catcher they signed? Was it Zunino?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Zunino is not going to displace Bo Naylor from too many starts, I would have to imagine. So for that reason, I would be most excited for Bo Naylor.
All right. And then to round out the first half of their prospect top 10s that they did first baseman. I think they released that today or yesterday, but it's led by Tristan Casas of the Boston Red Sox and followed by Tyler Soderstrom, Kyle Manzardo, Matt Mervis, Jordan Diaz, Michael Toglia, Grant Levine, Ivan Melendez, Xavier Isaac, and Nico Cavadas. The Red Sox have both Casas and Cavadas, and the Rockies have Toglia and Levine, and the Rays got Manzardo and Isaac. So there's definitely a lot of talent here, and it seems to be sort of clumped together on just a few teams, but there's definitely some exciting names. The A's also have 2 in Soderstrom and Diaz, so that's where I'll go. It's hard for me to pick, but I'll go with Soderstrom because he's ranked higher. Jordan Diaz was really good last year in the minors, so I think he's sort of sneaky because he's not really a well-known name, but Soderstrom was the first-round pick for the A's back in the 2020 draft. He was drafted as a catcher, but he was a guy who was known more for his bat than his glove, so he's transitioned quickly over to first base, especially since the A's acquired Shea Langeliers from the Braves in the Matt Olson trade just last year. Soderstrom does have a really good bat. He hit 29 home runs last year across 3 levels, and he'll be just 21 going into next season. I don't think he debuts with the A's this year, especially because they likely want to have as many years of control into the future, and they're not really going to be competitive this year, but he's pretty exciting. I think he's got a pretty good contact bat and a lot of power, but he's already striking out too much and doesn't walk a lot, so he'll definitely need to work on his plate discipline. But considering that he's ranked this high amongst first basemen, I'm pretty excited for him. I know who Davis is picking.
Shut up, Jake. I was prepared in case you were going to take Matt Mervis from me to talk about Michael Toglia.
I wouldn't do that.
But I will talk about Matt Mervis. Matt Mervis was not really a heralded prospect up until last year. He was 24. He's actually going to be going into his age 25 season next year, which is old for a rookie. He's a first baseman, obviously. That's what we're talking about. He just kind of exploded onto the scene. He started the year in high A and ended the season in triple A. He's a guy that walks a lot, doesn't strike out very much, hits for a ton of power. He posted in high A, he posted a 181 WRC plus, double A, 147 WRC plus, and in triple A, where he spent a large chunk of the season, most plate appearances, posted a 152 WRC plus. He ended up hitting like 38 home runs last year and ended up working his way into a WBC roster spot with Team Israel. So it's going to be really cool to see Matt Mervis. He's projected this next year probably not to be a starter, but to still end up getting a good amount of quality at bats. And honestly, if they're going to have Eric Hosmer continually take at bats away from Matt Mervis, because I've talked about that several other times, Jed Hoyer ought to be thrown in the gulag because that's just poor baseball planning. He's projected for like a 122 WRC plus, and he ended up just falling short of the top 100 prospects list in general. I really like Matt Mervis. He's on the older side, but he's just got a lot of upside there. Hits the ball really hard, doesn't strike out a lot, and he hits line drives, which is what the Cubs preach. So, yeah, I'm excited for Matt Mervis because most of the Cubs prospects that are very highly regarded are pitchers or outfielders, and he's like their really, really star infield prospect.
All right, Matt, you got any thoughts on these first basemen?
No, I'm not too familiar with a lot of these guys. I mean, obviously interesting, the guy at the top there, Casas at Boston. He got some experience last year. Did he play for the Red Sox? Yeah. Okay. So he'd be a good chance to see him this year. Who is it that plays catcher for them? I'm trying to think. The Red Sox. It's first base, isn't it? Sorry. Catcher.
They had Bobby Dahlbeck there before.
Yeah.
And Hosmer for like a hot minute, but neither of them are very good. Neither were going to block Tristan Casas, so he should have a pretty good road to be the starter this year if that's the way they want to go. What does Dahlbeck strike out like 70% of the time?
Maybe more.
99% of the time.
All right. Well, let's get on to the fun part. We're going to look back at some old top 100 prospect lists and just I think it's like a fun remember some guys and also see how wrong these prospect rankings can be. Not sort of talking S about the prospect rankers, but just how much of a crapshoot it really is. But this first list, 2011, the top 100 prospect list, not 100% sure if this is preseason, midseason, or end of season, but it's still a loaded list. And it's somewhat funny too, because you really, I'll just run it down. I'll do the top 10. The number 10 prospect in 2011 was Julio Teheran, who had some great years in Atlanta before fading off really fast. I think they pushed him too hard. You got number 9, Jesus Montero, who was super hyped catcher prospect for the Mariners, who never panned out. Then you got Eric Hosmer, new Cub, was number 8. Mike Moustakas was number 7. This was back when the Royals had a really loaded farm system. We got everybody's favorite guy, Aroldis Chapman, at number 6, which is crazy because he was a starting pitching prospect back then. And we got number 5, Dustin Ackley. That's another Mariners prospect. 4 was Dominic Brown, who had some pretty solid years with the Phillies. And then we get to the fun part. We get Bryce Harper at number 3. That's fair. That one, they got that one right. Number 2, though, is Jeremy Hellickson, who I'm not even sure many people know who that is, but he was definitely just a guy throughout his career. And then number 1 is Mike Trout. So to have Jeremy Hellickson in between Mike Trout and Bryce Harper is really something funny.
Oh, man. I'm just excited to hear what Matt has to say about Dustin Ackley.
Yeah, I heard you say Montero and Ackley, and I just remember that thinking, oh, this is it. This is the year the drought's going to be opening. And it just never materialized. I mean, both of those players were huge disappointments for the Mariners, really, looking back. I forget where he went after Seattle, Ackley, but
New York.
Was it New York? Okay, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, high hopes for him in an infield, and it didn't work out. So.
Cool parts of this list. I know Jake didn't talk about them, but if you happen to go back in your free time and look at the 2011 top 100, after 10 and like in between probably like 15 to 25 is so weird because it's like you got some names in there. Freddie Freeman. Like Jameson Taillon has been a very serviceable pitcher. Zach Britton got Cy Young votes. Mike Minor's been very serviceable. Martin Perez obviously was an all-star last year. Manny Machado is like a perennial all-star. And then 25 is Chris Sale. And you got guys ahead of them like Jacob Turner and Michael Pineda, Kyle Drabeck, like Jesus Maria, like Montero, guys that you just never hear anything about. Just ahead of guys like this, showing, like Jake said, yeah, it's just a complete and total crapshoot.
Yeah. This was definitely a fun time. I think this was the year Mike Trout debuted, so he was clearly the number 1 prospect at the time, and he and Bryce Harper would be linked for many years. So they definitely got those right, but I think those were easy ones. So let's move on to 2012. I think this top 100 list is broken still. It is. It says coming soon, but good thing they got top 10 by position still. So we can see the top guy at each position. The top guy at first base was Anthony Rizzo. So I think that one's pretty solid. I see John Singleton there at number 3. That one's disappointing. Second base, they had Colton Wong, number 1. They seem to be good with the top guys. If you're a number 1 ranked prospect at your position, it seems that you've got a bright future ahead of you. Shortstop, they've got Manny Machado back when he was a shortstop, and Lindor's number 3 there. Third base, they have Nolan Arenado. They don't miss. Anthony Rendon is the number 3 one there. Catcher, they've got Nobody. Coming soon. Are you sure it's going to be coming soon? That seems like something that was already done. But yeah, they also still had Bryce Harper and Mike Trout in the outfield. So I guess Trout debuted at the end of 2011, and then 2012 was when he won Rookie of the Year. So they were still both on the prospect rankings, but this is when they flip-flopped Bryce Harper and Mike Trout in the rankings, which was not smart. They had it right the first time. And then amongst right-handed pitchers, it was Julio Teheran number 1, and left-handed pitchers was Matt Moore number 1. I think I'm remembering the rankings now. It was Matt Moore number 1, Bryce Harper number 2, Mike Trout number 3. So Matt Moore might have had the best season last year out of all of them. Actually, no, Mike Trout was incredible, but Matt Moore was actually finally living up to that prospect hype as a reliever for the Rangers.
Oh yeah. I liked looking at this because third base, you get to be reminded of weird transitions between players, because they had Nick Castellanos as the 4th rated third baseman, and he came up with the Tigers as a third baseman. It was absolutely miserable in the field, and they're like, look, man, this is not working out. You need to go to the outfield, where he has still been pretty garbage in the outfield, but it's a lot. So there, I like this list because you get to see cool guys that people were really high on, like Jed Jerko and Bubba Starling.
I think I've got the list in front of me here. Looking down a bit further, 16, we've got Danny Hultzen, who's in the Mariners system, and great things expected from him. I think he had a pretty torrid time with injury. Never really made it. And a name on there that stands out as well, Tyler Skaggs. Further down the list. So yeah.
Rest in peace.
Tyler Skaggs.
Indeed.
And also, if you look at the 2012 prospect rankings just from the outfield, you have 3 MVPs, because you got Bryce Harper, Mike Trout, Christian Yelich. 3 MVPs just from outfielder rankings from 2012.
That's pretty crazy. 2013 is also more interesting because you start to see more guys that are still active. I think there was some retired guys in the 2011 list, but now you have, leading off the list, Jurickson Profar, and then Dylan Bundy's number 2, the late Oscar Taveras number 3, which is crazy because Tyler Skaggs is number 10 and Jose Fernandez is number 7. So you have 3 players that have passed away in the top 10 of the 2013 list. That is crazy. Will Myers is number 4, Taijuan Walker number 5, Travis d'Arnaud number 6, Zach Wheeler 8, and Garrett Cole number 9. That's crazy. Because I didn't really look at these prior. I wanted to sort of have my first takes on these, but that's wild that 3 of the top prospects on there have passed away. That's wild. Oscar Taveras, I remember being really excited for, because he had a pretty solid debut, I think in September of the year before he passed away, and then he never really got to expound upon that. But Jose Fernandez was one of my favorite players while he was playing, and that was probably the baseball player death that hit me the hardest thus far. So that was disappointing. And then Tyler Skaggs also just as disappointing, especially just the nature of that death as well. But yeah, this is a crazy list, especially with Jurickson Profar being number 1, because he has never really had a season that is sort of worthy of being the number 1 overall prospect.
Right. This was also a year where the Cubs started stockpiling guys. Just from scrolling down, you'd see guys like Javier Baez and Albert Almora, and Addison Russell, guys like that you remember. Obviously, Javier Baez is the only one that's had really any major success in the league. Addison Russell, we'll just not talk about him. And Albert Almora is a baseball player, so scored the most important run in franchise history. So I want to talk about him.
Who was the top Mariners prospect at the time? Oh, that was Taijuan Walker was on your team back then.
Yeah. No, it was high hopes there. Again, Hultzen's a bit further down the list, as is Mike Zunino. So he's still playing, but as we talked about earlier, signed on with the Guardians and not really expected to shake the world too much there. So, but Taijuan Walker, he had some great years in Seattle.
Who was he traded for to the Diamondbacks back in the day?
Was it Ketel Marte? Was it Marte?
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah, actually, no, because he went with Ketel Marte, right?
Oh, I may be getting confused. Okay,
because Ketel was on the Mariners first, and now he's on the Diamondbacks.
Gene Segura, Mitch Haniger, and Zach Curtis.
Okay.
Yes.
So you got
Thanks,
Mitch Haniger.
Wikipedia.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And Gene Segura.
Now Mitch Haniger's on the Giants. Oh yeah, can't count out Gene Segura. Yeah, that's pretty wild. And this was not the best top 100 prospect list I've seen, but I don't know. I think maybe it makes up for the fact that 3 of them are no longer with us, and Garrett Cole and Zach Wheeler are both in the top 10, but nobody else on that list really was too great. So we'll move on to 2014, where it starts getting into the more modern prospects, guys that are still pretty young, still in their 20s. It leads off with Byron Buxton, who probably might have been one of the most hyped prospects in the last 10 years or so, just because he had the whole package. And then Xander Bogaerts, number 2, rest in peace, Oscar Taveras, number 3, Miguel Sano, 4, Archie Bradley, 5, Taiwan Walker, 6, Javi Baez, 7, Carlos Correa, 8, Chris Bryant, 9, and Francisco Lindor, 10. This is a pretty interesting list. I think this was like the height of the Cubs prospect hype, because this was 2 years before the World Series, and this is when they had Baez and Russell and Bryant in there, and I think everybody was really pumped to see what they can do. And then I think this was also when we started seeing the current crop of insanely good major league shortstops sort of show up, because we had Bogaerts, Baez, Correa, Lindor, and Corey Seager all in the top 100 at the same time. And those guys have all been proliferating around the majors for some time and really making their presence felt. But yeah, this was definitely an interesting time. I think this is sort of like when I feel like this is when prospect rankings really started to become more popular.
I agree. And if you scroll down the list and look at the top 100, there's some big names that are like still really far down on the bottom. Joey Gallo, 92. And I think, where was he? Mookie Betts is in the 60s, 62. Mookie Betts.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got guys that just flame out in the top 10 that never turned into anything, like Miguel Sano, strikeout machine.
Yeah, pretty wild. Just the amount of guys on here that sort of turned into complete stars and then also sort of faded out. Like Archie Bradley was number 5, and now he's having a hard time sticking on bad teams. So I don't know if that was a good call, but
did have an MVP in the top 10 though.
Yeah. 2015 is pretty interesting as well, because we also have Byron Buxton leading off with Chris Bryant, Carlos Correa, Francisco Lindor, and Addison Russell rounding out the top 5. And then the bottom half of the top 10 is Lucas Giolito, Corey Seager, Julio Urias, Joey Gallo, and Noah Syndergaard. This is just like a who's who of who's all-stars in the majors the past few years outside of Addison Russell. But yeah, I mean, this was probably the best top 10 list we've seen so far in terms of getting it right.
Oh yeah, I think everyone in this top 10, I want to say everyone in this top 10 has been an all-star.
Was Russell an all-star?
I think so. I need to Google that, but I don't know. But I want to say almost everyone in that top 10, even if Addison Russell isn't, still almost everyone is or has been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Addison Russell was an all-star in 2016.
Wow.
Yeah. So looking a bit further down, you got 96. You got Rafael Devers coming in, just scraping into the top 100.
Was Syndergaard ever an all-star? I need to look that up.
Had to have been. Yeah, but it's crazy when guys that are so good like that, like Devers, sort of are ranked that low. Part of it is them being really young and you don't want to move them up until they're closer to the majors. And another part of it is just missing out on guys. Like, I don't think he should have been behind. I mean, obviously with hindsight, you can't really put him behind the majority of the guys on this list, but yeah, it's pretty crazy to see perennial all-stars like that narrowly missing out on the list. It's definitely a fool's errand to try to project players at this age. But we'll move on to 2016, and still got Corey Seager and Byron Buxton on this list. It's crazy that I think Byron Buxton has the most most lists being number one prospect on. And so that's like separating all the preseason and midseason and end of season lists. So Byron Buxton might be the most hyped prospect of all time, but Corey Seager really got a lot of hype as well. And that did earn him a big contract later in his career. But the other guys on this list, we got some returnees like Giolito and Urias, but it's also got JP Crawford, Orlando Arcia, Yohan Moncada, Dansby Swanson, and Joey Gallo, and Tyler Glasnow. I remember Yohan Moncada was just an insane prospect. I think people thought he was going to be like switch hitting Bo Jackson or something.
Yeah, you got some big names rounding out this top 20, like Trey Turner, Blake Snell, Steven Matz, Rafael Devers, who, like Matt said, jumped up a ton. What would you say? He was like 96 or something 96, like that?
Yeah.
Now he's in 17th. Nomar Mazara was like a big prospect for like quite some time. Jose Barrios and Austin Meadows round out the top 20. Like, all sorts of guys that are still big contributors in the league in general. And then you got Lewis Brinson, the big return for Christian Yelich. So,
and just outside of the top 20, Alex Bregman just coming in at 22 as well. So,
I didn't even see him. Wow. Yeah, Bregman at 22. And then other guys like Benintendi, he was an all-star last year. Gleyber Torres, Ozzie Albies.
Aaron Judge, number 31.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they were pretty low on him, I think, because he really didn't have the same swing that he has now, and he's really developed a lot. But yeah, I mean, obviously, AL home run record holder right there. Can't forget about Jackson Frazier.
Oh yeah,
I see that name, and I'm like, who is that?
He was going to get traded for the entire world back then.
And you see he's ranked number 100. It's quite interesting. Matt Olson.
Ooh.
Really low on him at that stage.
Yeah, it's crazy. It makes you think, like looking forward to the top 100 prospect list that's going to come out at the end of next week. Like who at the end of the list or who off the list is going to be, a perennial all-star. It's definitely interesting to take these old lists into consideration when considering current prospects. Like, I don't know, because obviously there's in every list, the top 10 is never correct. So there's obviously going to be 2 or 3 guys that aren't going to be all-stars in the top 10. And it's interesting to see who those guys are. And if you can, it's sort of coming to the understanding that it's impossible to predict that. So the final list we'll look at, since I just wanted to go 5 years in the past, 2017, we had Andrew Benintendi at number 1, which is wild. He had a really great start to his career and had a really awesome minor league season that year. And that's probably what led to that. But you also have Yohan Moncada, Gleyber Torres, Dansby Swanson, Ahmed Rosario, Alex Reyes, JP Crawford, Victor Robles, Tyler Glasnow, and Austin Meadows. I think this is sort of one of the weaker top 10s and might even be the weakest top 10 we've seen, because all of these guys have had their moments of being really good, but most of them have sort of underwhelmed, except maybe, I mean, the fact that like Dansby Swanson might be the best one on this list. And obviously he had a great year last year and just signed with the Cubs, but being a former number 1 overall pick and the number 4 prospect and not really being a guy that's had more than 1 or 2 all-star appearances is somewhat disappointing, especially if he's considered the best guy in the top 10.
Yeah, I was quite surprised to see JP Crawford in there at 7. He's a fan favorite at Seattle and a good locker room guy, good teammate and all that. But yeah, I was surprised to see him coming in so high at that stage with the Phillies.
Oh yeah, there's some cool names further on down this list though. You got Lucas Giolito dropped out of the top 10 from the previous year and goes to 12. Ozzie Albies was 11th. You got Bellinger 13, and then this was 2017. Eloy Jimenez started the season Chicago Cub, ended as the White Sox. Big return in one of the worst trades in Cubs history. Brendan Rodgers was like the crown jewel of the Rockies system for a long time, and he's just been like very okay. Michael Kopech, Rafael Devers, Lewis Brinson's still here. Mickey Moniak, who still is a baseball player that you don't really have anything else to say about. There's still some cool names further on down the list. You got guys like Ian Happ. We got the Mariners fan here. We had Kyle Lewis just cracking top 30, 29. And then 34, 35, two of the best hitters in the American League just in general. You got Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Kyle Tucker.
Wow. Yep, and the aforementioned Josh Hader at 38 when he was still a starting pitching prospect.
Oh, yeah.
And another Matt.
Cool names there on down here.
At 100, this time Matt Chapman coming in with the A's.
Oh, wow.
All right, so next time there's a Matt as the number 100 prospect, he's destined for stardom.
Yes, exactly.
Let's see. Last year, the number 100 prospect was not named Matt. It was Wilmer Flores, the pitcher on the Tigers. So I don't know. We'll see about that. I think it would have to be a major coincidence to see another Matt at 100, but that is a good call, especially by someone named Matt.
Two really, really underrated. Well, one really highly rated pitcher, one super underrated one in the 90s. You got Walker Buehler in 93, and you got Cal Quantrill, who's quietly been one of the better pitchers in the American League in 97.
Yeah.
Cal Quantrill really, Jake winced. Cal Quantrill is nuts, Jake. You're
nuts.
Moron.
You're
a moron.
You're nuts, bro.
Absolutely not. Cal Quantrill is the truth.
He's had the same xFIP every single year for his career, and it's at 4.43. I think he's very mediocre.
And he's outperforming it every single time, Jake.
Yes.
Advanced metrics are for nerds and dorks, just like you.
All right. Yeah. So you've got your AL Cy Young picked out for the article that's coming.
I'm not picking him, Jake. I'm picking Nathan Eovaldi. I do that every year.
You've done it one year. You can't say you've done it every year.
You don't know what I've written yet for this current one, so maybe if I do it this year. I've done it one time, Jake, and I chose Nathan Eovaldi, so I've done it every year I've participated so far.
Okay, yeah, that is a fair point. And I'm reloading the article to see if you've written anything, and no, you have written nothing. So yeah. Matt's ahead of you. Matt is beating you in the article writing process right
Absolute
now.
bum. It's a top 10. They don't even have the top 10 for 2023. Unbelievable. Can't work under these conditions. Jake either.
No, because they're coming out with it next Friday. That's what I've been saying for the last 30 minutes.
We'll go
all
over it
to lead up to hype everybody up for the next. Yeah. Oh, we'll definitely go over it. We'll also be going over Hall of Fame results on the next podcast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, should we bring in the closer? And
I think it'd be a good time for that.
All right. Cool. So we've got an interesting guy today. Matt, if you don't know, we close out every podcast with a different closer. So I just do a sort of career overview of a different closer every week to end the show. And this week we've got Gene Garber, who I have no idea who that is, but he was on the top saves leaders of all time. And he was pretty solid across a 19-year career from 1969 to 1988. During which he pitched for the Pirates, Royals, Phillies, and Braves, and then the Royals again. He was drafted by those aforementioned Pirates in the 20th round of the 1965 draft, and he debuted 4 years later in June of 1969 at the age of 21 against Davis's Chicago Cubs, during which he pitched 4 1/3 innings with 5 hits, 3 earned, 1 walk, and 3 Ks, and he made just one more appearance that year in 1969. He sort of got his success by having a really weird delivery that was like herky-jerky. He turned his whole back to the batter before unleashing the ball from like a submarine style arm slot, so basically touching the ground. So that really made his stuff play up a lot because it was so funky, and it led to his most effective pitch being a changeup that really worked well to keep batters off balance. He pitched exclusively out of the bullpen in 1970 to a 5.24 ERA, and then missed the entirety of the 1971 season due to injury, came back in 1972 and struggled to a 7.11 ERA. So really was not great with the Pirates. And then so he ended up with the Royals in 1973 and began to turn his career around. He logged his first 11 saves of his career across a career high 152 2/3 innings that season. And then in 1974, he wasn't great in the first half, so he was shipped off to Philadelphia, where he turned into an elite setup man, pitching to a 2.06 ERA across 48 innings pitched in Philly. His first full season there in 1975 saw him pitch with a heavy workload because he led the National League in games and games finished, and he also racked up 14 saves and a 3.60 ERA across 110 innings. And then across the next 2 seasons, he really started to morph into one of the better relief pitchers in the game. He combined for 30 saves across the 1976 and 77 season while shutting down offenses late in games. He combined for a 2.57 ERA and a 1.09 whip across 196 innings in those seasons. And he tallied a career high 92 strikeouts in 1976. He parlayed that success into what may be considered the best season of his career in 1978, during which he pitched 117 innings with a career best 2.15 ERA, a career best 0.92 whip, and 25 saves. And he was actually traded in the middle of that season after posting a 1.40 ERA with Philadelphia in the first half. He was traded to the Braves, where he became the full-time closer and was one of the best closers in Braves history during his time there. His first full season in Atlanta wasn't nearly as successful as that previous season. He had a 4.33 ERA and 25 saves, but he bounced back across the next 2 seasons before reclaiming the closer role in his most nationally recognized campaign in 1982. So 1980, he had a 3.83 ERA and 7 saves. 1981, he had a 2.61 ERA and 2 saves. And then he just kept getting better. Going into 1982, he had his second most innings pitched with 119.1. He had his second best ERA with a 2.34, and he tallied a career best 30 saves. And that led to him finishing as the 7th place finisher in NL Cy Young Award voting and 19th in NL MVP voting. And then for the next 4 years in Atlanta, he sort of had an up and down career. In 1983, he had a 4.60 ERA and 9 saves. It's sort of indicative of how relief pitchers are, just up and down careers, small sample sizes and such. 1984, he was a little better, 3.06 ERA and 11 saves. Then they kept him out of the 9th inning in 85 as he pitched to a 3.61 ERA and only 1 save. But 1986, he finished very strongly with a 2.54 ERA and 24 saves. I think he was 38 at that time. His age 39 season, he pitched one more half season in Atlanta before being traded to the Kansas City Royals for his second stint with the team. That ended his career in Atlanta, which saw him end his time in Atlanta as the all-time franchise saves leader, until that record of 141 saves was broken by John Smoltz and subsequently Craig Kimbrell. He played one final season at the age of 40 for the Royals before retiring. And at the time of his retirement, his career record of 931 pitching appearances was 5th all time. So he really appeared in a lot of games. So I'm very surprised that I've never heard his name before, but he ended his career with 16.7 Baseball Reference WAR across 1,510 innings pitched with 940 strikeouts, a 3.34 ERA, a 1.26 whip, and 218 saves, which is good for 46th on the all-time save leaderboard. I know Davis doesn't, but Matt, do you have any memories of Gene Garber?
Do not. No, I've not heard his name before tonight. So thank you for the education.
Wow, sure. Jake. Wow. Do you think I never watched Gene Garber in his prime?
No, I don't.
Okay. Would you want a cool fun fact about Gene Garber? Well, 2 of them, really?
Yes.
You talked about his windup. He was a submarine guy.
Yeah, I said that.
Submarine guy, sidearm guy. You also know. You want to hear a cool thing? He is actually the one who broke Pete Rose's hitting streak. He had a 44-game NL hitting streak. He broke it in a game in 1978. So that's really cool. Also, if you haven't seen a picture of him, he had an 80-grade beard. It was a really solid beard.
Yeah, not like the 3 of us. I think the 3 of us can combine our facial hair and not come close.
No, and even then, older guy, Gene Garber, 80-grade beard.
Nice.
Just an awesome baseball dude.
Cool.
Yeah. So if anybody's interested in hearing facts about closers, definitely go back and watch the previous 44 episodes of the podcast, because in almost every single one we've had a closer shut down the podcast. So it's sort of becoming a I can't think of the word. Sort of just a collection of all the different closers and little mini biographies about them.
Who's your favorite all-time closer? Both of you guys.
Davis.
Jake's is probably Brian Wilson.
Now I can't say that.
My favorite all-time closer, I don't know. I really don't know. Probably Billy Wagner. I talk about Billy Wagner all the time. I really like Billy Wagner. I really like Kimbrel, honestly. But Marmol is probably my guy. He's the heart attack closer. I love Carlos Marmol.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Brian Wilson's definitely the easy choice for me. He was just so exciting at his peak for the Giants, and that was like my original peak of watching baseball before I rebooted back in like 2017. Yeah, Brian Wilson's dope. He's good friends with Dallas Braden too, and I listen to his podcast. They both partake in smoking something that's not cigarettes. So. Yeah.
That's not a surprise if you've ever seen Brian Wilson. He doesn't have the beard anymore though, right?
No, and it's scary.
That's weird. I don't like that.
Yeah.
The Giants have always had some cool pitchers.
Yeah.
Tim Lincecum is one of my top 3 baseball players, that like one of my favorites ever. I love Tim Lincecum. Really love Brian Wilson too. Hunter Pence is also sick. I saw a tweet earlier today that was like, what's the sweetest right-handed swing in like baseball history? And I was like, I really, really like Hunter Pence.
Sweetest? That was the weirdest.
Yeah, that's why it's awesome. It's like
most unconventional.
Yeah, it worked though. He's also I play a lot of Magic the Gathering, and he's super in Magic the Gathering, so I really like Hunter Pence.
Matt, who was your favorite closer of all time?
Oh, well, I guess it would have to be Sasaki, Kazuhiro Sasaki for the Mariners back in the day.
Yep.
It was good times then.
He closed out a podcast very early on.
Oh, glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Mariners have had some great closers.
Cool.
Yeah, it's nice to see Eddie Diaz doing well with the Mets now. Yeah, looked a bit shaky for a while there, but no, he'll be a good fit for them for sure.
One of the Mariners' former closers just retired actually this last week too, Steve Cishek.
Oh, did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, just going off on a quick tangent before we close it out, but it's crazy the dialogue that sort of surrounded the Edwin Diaz trade since it happened. When it first happened, everybody was like, oh my God, the Mets are so stupid because Edwin Diaz really struggled in his first year and the Mariners ended up with one of the top prospects in the game in Jared Kelenic. And now that narrative has totally flipped. Now that Kelenic has floundered in the majors and Edwin Diaz is the best closer in baseball.
Yeah, that's a good observation. That's exactly right. Yeah,
Kelnic's going to be good this year. We're going to manifest that.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. If he's good this year, so is Joe Adell. So,
yeah, they're like hand in hand. Maybe they need to be on the same team in platoon, and then they'll be good. But yeah, that's all we've got for this episode, number 45 of Free Baseball Podcast. Thank you, Matt, for joining. It was awesome to have you. We'll have to have you back, especially when we talk World Baseball Classic. That's going to be awesome. We'll definitely need you to come back for that. Plug yourself, Matt. Where do you write? What's your Twitter? Let everyone go follow you.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. So my Twitter, I haven't got it up on the screen, I don't think there. It's Matt Partridge 17. So perhaps I'll have to make sure that goes out on my future writings. So I do some writing over here in the UK on various different sports. I used to work as a producer for Sky Sports, subsidiary of Fox Sports. So baseball's always been my love, really, I guess, since I started playing. But I do some work over here. And I work for a professional football team. I guess you'd call it soccer team, right? So, I try and keep my hand in. And, just love sports. So it's been great to be with you guys. It's just gone 4:05 here in the morning. So I'm sort of hanging a little bit now.
Thank you for staying up with us. It's late on my end. Jake gets the benefit of being on the West Coast. So it's not past his bedtime there.
No, it's dinner time.
Yeah. But I'm Davis Bird. You can follow me on Twitter at DVSBird. As always, my stuff's always on the screen. You can follow Jake Crumpler at Jake Crumpler. Super easy. We all also are a part of Athletes Hub. You can follow the Athletes Hub on Twitter at Athletes Hub. Super easy. And you can read all of our stuff at athleteshub.org. We're working on a way too early predictions article, which we will cover on a later podcast, but you're going to also have to read it because we're not going to give you everything. But yeah, the best part about us is we're sports fans. We're sports writers too, but we're not big corporate sports writers. So you're getting fan opinions. You're hearing what we have to think. We're just like you guys that are watching. But yeah, it's the biggest thing about us. Jake, plug your stuff like always.
Yeah, you can read my stuff, obviously, at theathleteshub.org. Davis said that we're going to have an article coming out next week, and we should have plenty more coming out throughout the regular baseball season. You can read more of my work also at pitcherlist.com, which I've got an article coming out on Friday morning and another one coming out, I think, on Monday morning next week. So definitely be on the lookout there. And you can also read me over at baseballhq.com if you want to see all of my work and all of my podcasts. It's all over at crumplerbaseball.com. So there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out over the next couple of weeks. I also just recorded a podcast for Pitcher List, which is actually the podcast network there is doing crazy good. They were the 5th most listened to podcast feed amongst fantasy sports podcasts in the United States last year. So we're doing pretty well.
That's sick. But yeah, that's all we've got for tonight. Make sure you join with us next Wednesday. I know it's Thursday. We typically do Wednesday. It's just been weird circumstances again. But yeah, check back with us soon.
Okay.